Yeah, he's got it. Thank you. It's 5:30, so we'll get underway. Before we start, I'd just like to point out for everyone the location of the fire exits, which is over there and over there. Can I ask that all mobiles are switched off or to silent? And just so that everyone knows, an audio recording of this meeting will be broadcast live and will be afterwards published on the HTC website. I'd like to remind members of the public that you should remain silent unless you're called as an official speaker. And members, when speaking, please remember to switch your microphone on to start and off to finish. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. What do we have?
We've received apologies from Matthew Allen, Councillor Alan Baldwin, Councillor Christine Costin, Councillor Liz Kitchen, Tim Lloyd and Ian Stannard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others?
Oh, Gordon Lindsay, sorry.
Gordon Lindsay as well. Thank you. Item 2, to approve as correct the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of January 2023. I'll sign them after the meeting unless anyone has any comments. Right. Okay, item 3, any declarations of interest from members? Not seeing any. Item 4 is Chairman's announcements. I don't have any announcements. So I'd now like to welcome to this meeting all the speakers and members of the public here tonight. I'll be calling you at the appropriate time for you to come forward and use the microphone on the table there with the light on. This is switched on for you. You don't have to do anything to it. I'll tell you how long you have to speak. And if you overrun, I'll ask you to finish your remarks as soon as you possibly can. And now, for the benefit of the public, could officers please introduce themselves?
I'm Guy Everest, the Applications Team Leader.
Good evening, Angela Moore, Senior Planning Officer in the Major Projects Team.
Hello, I'm Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
I'm Samantha Whitlock, Planning Solicitor.
And Liz Fennick, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now consider reports from the Heads of Development and Building Control. Item 5 is appeals, which is just for noting. So we will move to item 6, the first substantive item on the agenda, which is DC 212873, Nowhurst Business Park, Guildford Road, Broadbridge Heath, which comes with an officer recommendation to accept subject to appropriate conditions. The officer would like to make their presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you. The application site is located off the A281 Guildford Road, about 2 kilometres to the northwest of Broadbridge Heath. The application site boundary is shown here in red. The site is located outside any defined built-up area boundary, so in planning terms, it's located within the countryside. The site is currently unused and has recently been cleared of all remaining structures which were used in conjunction with the site's industrial history. The southern part of the site has historically been used for light industrial purposes, including open storage and use as a vehicle salvage and repair centre. The main part of the site has previously been used as landfill. The site's accessed directly from a roundabout off the A281. 2 Grade 2 listed residential houses are located close to the site's southern boundary, along Nowhurst Lane, along with several other residential houses which are all in close proximity to the site boundaries. Farlington School is located opposite the site's access point, the main building of which is also Grade 2 listed. The North River and its floodplain lie to the western side of the site, but the site's almost entirely located in flood zone 1, which means it's got a very low risk of flooding. Small pockets of ancient woodland are located to the southeast and to the west of the site, and Bridleway 1443 lies to the south of the site and links to further rights-of-way networks beyond. So by way of background, members may recall a previous application of the same scale and the same type of commercial development on this site, which was discussed by this committee in February 2018. The previous application, which was referenced DC 172131, shown on the left-hand side of the screen, was permitted in outline for close to 27,000 square metres of employment floor space. Concerns at the time about the impact of the intensification of noise and activity on the site towards neighbouring residents led to the imposition of a number of strict planning conditions, which restricted overnight operations and lighting within the site. External activity in Zone 1 was prohibited overnight between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. For Zones 2 and 3, which are in closer proximity to neighbouring residents and are therefore more sensitive, conditions were imposed to ensure that all activity was prohibited overnight between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m, with no activity at all on Sundays and public holidays. These conditions were agreed at the time by officers and the applicant in consultation with local members, and the previous planning permission was issued on that basis. The current application, which is shown on the right-hand side of the screen, has been proposed to effectively renew the previous permission. Due to the time it's taken to remediate the site and some other unforeseen commercial delays between 2020 and 2021, construction has not been able to commence, and the 3-year timeframe for submission of reserve matters applications has expired. That expired last February. The current proposal asks for the same type and extent of development as previously permitted. Officers are of the view that the conditions imposed previously to safeguard neighbouring amenity are still very relevant and therefore have been reimposed for this permission. The precise condition wording relating to the hours of operation and lighting is set out in the report before you, and I'd ask you to refer in particular to conditions 26 to 30, which have been reimposed to protect neighbouring amenity as per the previous permission. Another key difference between the current application and the previously permitted one is that the applicant has requested for the period to submit reserve matters to be extended from the usual 3-year period to an extended 5-year period. So whilst officers are of the view that in the current commercial climate, this is a reasonable request, we still want to see commercial development come forward on this site in the shorter term. So therefore, conditions have been drafted to require the first reserve matters application for at least one commercial building to be submitted in the usual 3-year period, and the remainder to be submitted within the extended 5-year period. So just turning to some of the details of the proposal, as per the previously approved application, the applicant has submitted indicative layout options for the site. As the application is proposed in outline, details regarding the precise layout and the look of the site are not for consideration now, but they would be assessed at a reserve matters stage. The layout options are therefore illustrative and show how the site could be configured, and these are the same drawings as were submitted and approved in 2017. Similarly, the parameter plan shown here is the same as submitted before. The plan continues to show the key parameters that future development on the site must adhere to. The plan highlights where existing landscaping on the site is located, including the established bunds that flank the main access road, as well as where enhanced zones for wildlife and landscaping would be located. In addition, as secured previously, an early planting zone is located on the southern boundary, which has been included again to ensure a mature and effective landscape buffer is established in this more sensitive location, and this is secured in the report in condition 11. Finally, the previously secured reduced eaves height zone, which is shown in blue on the plan, would continue to ensure that no building facing private properties on Nowhurst Lane or towards quarries would be exceeding 6 metres in height to the eaves and 10 metres overall. And this restriction was previously agreed by the council under the last application, and it's secured in condition 30. So in summary, the application is essentially a resubmission of DC 17-2131, which expired last year. The proposed type and quantum of development is exactly the same as previously approved. The planning conditions imposed before to protect neighbouring amenity, and that includes conditions to restrict the operating hours, building height, and conditions to require additional landscaping and boundary planting. These have all been reimposed in order to provide the same level of protection to neighbouring residents as the council deemed acceptable before. In terms of the need for this development now, given its previous approval in 2019, the employment floor space at Nowhurst has been now included in the council's list of committed employment sites in the latest version of the economic growth assessment. This assessment is used to inform the council's baseline position and calculation of need going forward into the next plan period. So therefore, alongside some other committed commercial sites listed in the EGA, this site is relied upon to meet identified employment needs for the district going forward. So the need for this employment site proposed is therefore still very relevant. And finally, it should be noted that following Natural England's position statement about water scarcity, the applicant's now required to demonstrate that the site is water neutral. The submitted water neutrality statement proposes a rainwater harvesting system with water storage and treatment facilities on site. This proposal has been demonstrated it can be water neutral to the satisfaction of officers and Natural England, who has confirmed no objection to the proposal. So subject therefore to the conditions listed in the report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement, which is currently being drafted, officers recommend to this committee that the application should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have three public speakers. Can I call first Neil Beer to the table there? And you have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Nowhurst Business Park is in a very quiet location. The noise report and the officer's report says the background noise level there is about 30 decibels. And with this decibel meter, I'd like to demonstrate how quiet that is. So if you could be silent just for a moment. Thank you. So this room, when no one's talking, is a lot noisier than Nowhurst Lane and Nowhurst Business Park is at night. Twice as noisy. Now the application proposes to replace that quiet with noises like this. And the noise of HGVs manoeuvring, loading and unloading. Now, I just want to mention I've got a PhD in mathematics, so I've calculated the appropriate volume for this. Now this noise would continue, this noise would continue through the night, every night, and potentially up to every 5 or 6 minutes through the night. So we would go from quiet, like this, or even quieter than this, to this. Now the applicant thinks this is acceptable. But how would you feel trying to sleep next to that, or your children? Please bear that in mind as you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second speaker is Jane Goring. And again, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I represent residents of Nowhurst Lane who live adjacent to the proposed development at Nowhurst Business Park, all of whom have objected to a crucial change proposed by Norman Marshall Limited, namely the amendment to nighttime operating restrictions to allow for activity on external parts of the site over the nighttime period. My focus is on the irreversible and highly detrimental impact of light within the context of 24-hour working. We wholeheartedly concur with Horsham District Council's own Environmental Health Department's conclusion that to permit this would significantly alter the character of the rural area, which is otherwise very quiet and very dark at night. Any kind of lighting necessary to ensure safe 24-hour working would introduce continuous, highly damaging and intrusive sky glow with an unacceptable increase in light pollution. Considering the speculative nature of the development, the Council's ecology report concludes that 24-hour lighting should be avoided to retain the amenity and character of the area. According to HDC's conservation officer, we already have a proposed development that will have permanent and irreversible impact. All lighting conditions and further recommendations for sensitive lighting schemes should be reimposed and enforced. We concur with the Council's landscape architect, who worryingly highlights that even during the permitted hours of operation, the limited amount of landscaping and the raised ground proposals will expose the development to far-reaching light penetration. We urge the Council to ensure that a low-level lighting scheme of bollards, as opposed to bright, far-reaching columns, is provided, and that all lighting is directed away from homes and other sensitive areas. Too much light pollution has serious health consequences. It disrupts ecosystems and wastes energy. Please help us mitigate the impact of this development and also protect the health of the environment and the local population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the third speaker is Paul Copeland. Thank you. You have 2 minutes as well.
Okay, thank you. Hello. I too represent local neighbours, and I too oppose the planning application on the grounds of the operating hours, noise and light pollution not being in keeping with the site's rural location. If the planning application approves the application with the basis of the conditions applied, then I would like to make some additional recommendations as to what might help to ensure compliance to those regulations. Firstly, that the landowner be required to place conditions on each individual rental agreement for each on-site business, and that these rental agreement terms match the planning conditions. For example, the prospective tenants must have it included within their contract to comply with noise management plans. This will help place the burden of compliance onto individual on-site businesses. Secondly, to help with the enforcement, the site entrance should be gated and there should be traffic barriers between each zone, controlled by timers so that they can only operate within those permitted hours. And cameras separately should be installed to track vehicle movements on site and between zones. Thirdly, 24/7 noise monitors should be installed at various locations, the positions of these to be agreed with local neighbours and residents. Fourth, the landowner should retain data to demonstrate compliance with all the planning conditions, and that this data must be freely and promptly available to residents and to Horsham District Council. Data would show actual operational times for the lighting for times for the vehicle movements and noise levels recorded by the monitors. The landowner should provide a structured escalation process separately to resolve issues. This should include a single point of contact for local residents and the provision of a quarterly review meeting to help any escalation. I object to this application, but request that, should it be approved, these additional conditions be added to those already suggested by the planning officer to help ensure compliance.
Thank you very much. Would the officers like to say anything in response to comments so far?
Yes, thank you. Clearly, many comments raised there about noise levels through the night. Just to reiterate to members that the conditions that have been recommended as part of this application are the same conditions as were previously agreed by the council and were associated with the approved application. We're not extending the flexibility on those hours any further than what was previously agreed. And just to reiterate as well that whilst the applicant has requested 24 hours operation on this site, we have considered that and denied that request through the imposition of the conditions that we have listed in the report. So there won't be any 24-hour external operation on the site, as was the case with the application before. Just with regard to the speaker that just spoke there, finally, requesting potential additional conditions to assist with the compliance of the conditions that we have recommended. I think, and my colleague next to me might be able to help me out here, but I believe those sit beyond the realms of what we can do in planning terms. And whilst some of those suggestions would be welcomed, and I think that the applicant should consider perhaps doing that, it would assist with our enforcement. It's not something that we could insist on in planning condition terms.
I would concur. In terms of any agreements with future occupiers of the site, that's really a matter outside of the control of the council. That would be a separate legal matter, so that's not something we can impose through the imposition of any planning permission. And in terms of ongoing monitoring and compliance, so we can't work on the basis that the conditions would be breached. I think that the information suggested is quite onerous. That being said, clearly the conditions are enforceable, and you know, if granted, we can pursue action if we need to. and the applicant may wish to have their own monitor of them, but I think it's unreasonable for us to require that level of information as part of any permission that we grant. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now go to the local members, which is councillors Ritchie and Newton. Who would like to?
Chairman, two speakers.
My apologies, there are two more speakers, which is Matthew Thomas. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the agent for the application, and I'm speaking on behalf of Norman Marshall, who has owned the site for a number of years. The latest application is a resubmission of the now lapsed outline permission previously granted in 2019. The amount of floor space proposed is the same as the previous permission. Proposed building heights, means of access, and landscape buffer zones are also exactly the same. The only significant change is that additional infrastructure has now been proposed to ensure the development accords with the need to secure water neutrality to address the issues in the Arun Valley catchment. The objective of this latest proposal is simply to renew the planning permission to make best use of the site and to secure its long-term future. The site has a history of previous employment use and has most recently been used for open storage and other industrial activities. The site is therefore considered to be suitable for continued employment use. The site is currently vacant and contributes nothing to the economy, so these proposals would help make more productive use of it. Since the last application was approved, works have been undertaken on site to demolish the redundant structures, remediate the ground, and undertake initial levelling works to prepare the site for development. The site is therefore ready and available for development. A number of occupiers have expressed interest in securing premises at the site over the last few years, but securing a commitment to the site has not happened. This has not been helped by the fluctuating economic conditions that the UK has experienced over the last 3 years, with very significant events over that time. There are currently good levels of interest in the site, and a number of occupiers are looking for new premises that could be accommodated here. However, the further investment into this site and the Horsham economy cannot be realised until the site has planning permission. Throughout the determination of the application, we've taken account of the comments raised in the determination period and sought to amend the proposal where required. The proposal is in accordance with the wider policy objectives of the adopted development plan and will not give rise to any unacceptable impacts, with a range of conditions to cover the points raised in the determination period. It will also maintain the supply of employment land in Horsham and support the local economy. As before, it is considered that the development for employment use of this site is appropriate and that planning permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll now call Nigel Smith, Slinfold Parish Council, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors. I'm Nigel Smith from Slinfold Parish Council. I note the points of the planning officer around the removal of the nighttime operation, but I will cover that in this anyway, if you don't mind. So Slinfold Parish Council strongly objects to this application on the basis that it represents a significant change in the original planning application. That change being the suggested 24/7 hours operation and the extended duration, the 5 years of planning consent. We'd like to reiterate our previous comments and concerns regarding the development of this site. The proposal for Class E, brackets G, brackets 3, B2 and B8 is too wide for this site, as it is in close proximity to residential properties and will create a significant amount of new traffic onto the already busy A281. Additionally, the council is very concerned around the proposed 24/7 operation on parts of the site. I'm not going to labour that point, as it's been covered by the planning officer. The parish council is pleased to see the suggested regulatory conditions 26 and 27 limiting nighttime operation, but we prefer that to be for the period 0700 to 2200 Monday to Saturday. Given the uncertainty around the type of nighttime usage, the parish council is also concerned about the noise generated internally and the enforcement of any infringements. As the site failed to attract tenants under the previous application, we can see no reason why that situation would now have changed apart from the 24-hour operation. We would like to see an assessment of both demand, including and excluding the nighttime operation, and I appreciate that's been covered, before any reapproval of permission is granted, and would seek to avoid other large industrial site filled with yet more multinational companies. Our preferred use would be for smaller businesses and offices, something like a base point centre where individuals can rent small offices and workshops on even a short-term basis. This would provide a facility for small businesses currently located at home or smaller, less suitable premises in the rural area to grow and access better premises. We continue to object to the suggested 5-year consent period and would like to see the more usual 3 years enforced. The Parish Council fully supports the views of the local residents, notes the number of objections and specifically those points raised in their letters of representation. Should approval be granted, we would like to see more screening around Zone 3 and the eastern section of Zone 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments from officers?
Yes, thank you. Again, it's just to reiterate that the several points raised there regarding the intensification of the site for the flexible use, the B2, B8 and the E-class use, which the speaker raised concerns about. Obviously, that was the same as proposed previously and was agreed by the council, so it's considered that is acceptable. The speaker mentioned that they would prefer operations to cease, I think he said at 10 p.m. The condition requires operations within the zones to cease at 11 p.m. And again, that was a condition that was agreed previously by the council. So we considered that to be acceptable last time. We would take a consistent approach now. An assessment of demand, I mentioned earlier that this site is considered to be a committed commercial site. So that's been outlined in the latest version of the economic growth assessment that the council has produced. We consider that site to be a commitment and a site that we rely on going forward to meet our identified commercial employment needs. And I believe the final point was around landscaping around zones 2 and 3, I think. As before, the applicant has proposed additional landscaping zones, which I think were shown on that plan there. You can see along the sort of southwestern edge. Those are retained and those are secured in condition 11, I believe it is.
Thank you very much. So we will now go to the local members. Who would like to go first? Okay. Councillor Newton? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I've listened and obviously I'm very familiar with this site and I have great sympathy for the concerns of the residents and Slimfold Parish Council. However, I have spent a considerable amount of time going through the concerns that they have, and we do have attached to this extensive conditions, and I have which address the problems and the concerns that people have. I have queried whether or not we are actually able to ensure that these conditions are met. And the answer is yes, we can, and they have to be met in order for the development to progress. The concern of the parish council and the residents has been the nighttime working, which I thoroughly understand because basically this is a very rural area, but that is now no longer happening. So it is recommended by the officers that we should approve this. Because of the amount of conditions which address quite specifically a lot of the concerns, but also because nighttime working is absolutely 100% not possible. We do require more commercial areas in this area. I mean, we do need to provide work and jobs for people, and it will enhance our economic growth. But can I just say that I am extremely interested in one of these suggestions that an applicant, an objector put forward, which is a site entrance to be gated. I'm aware that we cannot force any more conditions, but it would be extremely beneficial. I think that's a really good suggestion. If perhaps we could tell the applicants that we really would like this, if they would be willing to do so, it would be really beneficial. So we need to query this with the applicant. If I could just query that, but can I just say that I do understand the concerns. I'm pleased that the heights are now being observed and are subject to condition. The site has been cleared for some considerable time. Bat boxes, quite a few have been put in, and also we are Natural England are quite happy. And I think now is the time to regretfully accept the fact that we really cannot refuse this, much as we would all like to, and I agree with my parish council. However, I think that we really do have to pass it now. But we must, I would really like confirmation that these extensive conditions, which do address the vast majority, in fact, all the concerns are actually capable of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Thank you, enforced. Thank you. So can I have a query about the site entrance gate, please?
Yeah, I think in regard to the site entrance, there isn't a gate proposed as part of the site access point. So we can't consider it in terms of this proposal, but we can make the request of the applicant to consider that, and we could do that through an informative note on the decision notice. And it would be up to the applicant to consider whether that's something they would want to do.
Yeah, they will. What? Okay.
I'll just make a point quickly as well. You raised the point about the conditions and the enforceability of the conditions. You're quite right. There are 45 conditions, I think, attached to this application, which is quite a significant number. Each one is required in order to make the application acceptable. And we are confident that each condition can be enforced. We wouldn't be able to list it as a condition if it wouldn't meet the tests. Some conditions require the applicant to submit information to us for subsequent approval. Some are regulatory conditions, so we would rely on, if there was a potential breach of condition, neighbours or whoever else to inform us, and our enforcement team have a duty to follow up on those potential breaches and to make good. So we're confident that each and every one of the conditions are enforceable.
Thank you. Can I also ask whether, if the applicants were willing to have a gate installed, would it require a separate planning application? And also, would that apply only if it were over 2 meters high?
Yeah, I think generally if it's anything over 2 meters fronting a highway, as this would, it would require separate permission, but there'd be scope within the scope of this application to amend it as a material amendment, so they wouldn't necessarily have to apply separately.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
First of all, and with apologies, I do need to deal with the declarations of members' interests in relation to this application. There's a homeowner who abuts Nowhurst Lane, who's known to me socially, and also on Nowhurst Lane, but not contiguous with this site. There's a homeowner who I'm in business with in relation to an online magazine called Sussex Exclusive, and we also promoted an event called Bubbles and Botanicals, which members may remember I promoted to members. I don't consider those to be prejudicial to my involvement, but I would certainly consider them to be personal.
Is that okay?
Sorry, you say you're in business with one of the homeowners?
Yes, I have a minority shareholding in a company, but that individual's home does not adjoin the site. It's not contiguous to the site, but it is in close proximity.
I'm afraid we require a short recess to examine the legalities of that. Shall I recess the committee? We'll have a 5-minute recess to discuss that issue.
And then I must apologise for not raising this in advance of the meeting, but when the matter came before the committee, I thought it was only right that I bring these matters to your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. We will now resume the meeting after legal clarification. So, Councillor Ritchie, I believe you understand, so you will be able to speak, but not thereafter take part in the debate or vote. That's the agreement. So, Councillor Ritchie, back to you.
Chairman, just to clarify, it's a bit more than that, is that once I've spoken, I would then have to withdraw from the meeting and then not take part in the debate or not vote.
Thank you.
Okay. So in a sense, one could look at this application and say it's all very straightforward. It's just a renewal of what we agreed 3 years ago. But I think there's some very valuable points that have been raised by local residents and the parish council. It seemed to me there were three particular, and I think the officer, save for in her opening remarks, has dealt with the first two. One being opening hours. So clearly opening hours are now going to be restricted back to what was agreed 3 years ago. And I think that has to be regarded as a satisfactory outcome. The second point I wanted to raise was actually about lighting. And I think the officer spoke about lighting very briefly in her opening remarks, but hasn't spoken to the subject since. And I'd invite the officer to just clarify what are the provisions relating to lighting, because I think they're quite important. It was something that both myself and Councillor Utan were particularly concerned with when this matter came before us some 3 years ago, and conditions were very much put in place. Then I've got several other points I'd just like to make, please.
Would the officer like to respond?
Yeah, I'll make a few remarks about lighting. So again, as previously, conditions were imposed to control lighting on the site, and that was concurrent with the operating hours. So it hasn't changed. The lighting condition requires column lighting and other bright lighting to be turned off half an hour before and after the operating hours cease. And outside of those hours, only emergency, low-level emergency bollard lighting would be allowed to allow for access in and out of the site if needed in an emergency. So that's conditions 28 and 29. There's also a further lighting condition that's within the landscaping condition that requires light design to be appropriate for ecology.
Thank you, that's very helpful to explain to this meeting. There was another point raised by a member of the public about, is it possible to put gating between the zones, so from zone 1 to zone 2 and from zone 2 to zone 3? And I can understand why the suggestion has been made. It seems to me that it's born out of a concern that partly past behaviours relating to this site have not been exemplary. But also there's a concern that what does the future hold, and none of us can guarantee the future, and that's why the request has come forth. But I think the request probably goes too far in my mind, and would be practically quite difficult from Horsham Council's point of view to enforce. And at a later stage I'll be interested in hearing what officers' comments are on that point. But there is another point which I think the officer said there is no gate on the front of this property joining the highway, but there is, and it's existing, it's pre-existing, so therefore wouldn't be necessary to include in this planning application. And I'd just like that point similarly confirmed. So there's 2 points there, and I've got one final point to make.
Yeah. So with regard to the zoning, the zoning was never meant to be a physical zoning point. So the zones were only really to control the relevant operating hours and lighting hours within those areas based on the sensitivity of those zones to neighbouring residents. I think it would be impractical to require physical zoning and separation between the sites, and given that it's outlined, we don't know who the end users would be, and that may have an ongoing restriction on who might want to occupy the sites going forward. So I think it would be a slightly difficult thing to require, and in any case it hasn't been proposed, so the applicant would need to come to us for that. I think you're right, actually. I think there is a gate, isn't there, at the front of the site? And in that respect, I'm just checking my site photos here. Yeah, it's
Councillor Hughes, I think you want to clarify that? Or?
Oh, sorry, just to say that I've just been reminded there is an existing gate there.
That's exactly what Councillor Ritchie's raised, yeah. So I was just double checking that, and he is right, there is a small gate to the site entrance. So in that respect, they would be within their ability to apply for a revised gate or to retain the existing.
To be clear, they wouldn't need to apply to retain the existing gate, would they?
No, it's there in existence
Exactly.
now, yeah.
Then my recollection of when this matter was previously considered was there was a concern about looking from north of the site across the site. I think there's a footpath that runs to the north of the site, and there was a concern that the boundaries were not particularly screened on the northern part of the site, and so there was a discussion 3 or so years ago when this matter was previously considered about making sure that that side of the site was similarly protected. And I'm wondering if there's a condition in the current recommendation.
I don't believe there's a public right of way to the north of the site, according to the map I have. Is that what you mean, or is there an informal path?
I think it's an informal path, but it was certainly raised by members of the public at the time of the previous application, and there was a discussion at committee about how that view could be protected. Because we, after all, accepting that if we accept the principle of this development, it is in the countryside, so that therefore people using the countryside close to the site shouldn't have their enjoyment impacted by the sight of industrial buildings.
Yeah, well, bearing in mind it isn't a public right of way, so it would just be an informal access potentially over private land. There's a consideration there as to how much impact that would truly have. But notwithstanding that, there is, as existing now, 7-metre high bunding, both to the north and the south of the existing access road, which would provide fairly sufficient screening of the site within and out with the site. And then beyond that, there is a decent width of buffer planting as well along the northern edge. So I think we consider, as before, that there is enough planting and screening there to address those concerns.
When you say planting along the northern edge, do you mean that both the northern and the western edge?
Around the entire site, yeah.
Before it rejoins quarries?
Yeah, yes, yeah. And particularly on the western edge of the site where there is woodland areas beyond as well, and that's where the river flows as well. So there's quite a significant buffer width there, but the buffering does extend the entire width around the site.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to officers for the explanations they've given, and also for you allowing me to speak on this matter. But as previously said, I'm now going to withdraw.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradnam.
Chairman, thank you. Almost all of the points I wish to raise have already been raised. But I do concur with Mr. Beer and the noise from lorries, because I've got 2 or 3 of these little sites in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in the ward that I represent. And quite frankly, they're nothing but a nuisance to the residents. And you can't stop, drivers, particularly long distance drivers, who turn up 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock before the site is open officially, and then you've got beep, 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 this vehicle is reversing, da-di-da, and it's not funny for the people who have to put up with it. So I very much hope that this council will enforce the conditions, particularly on the working hours. And well, that may not be possible to have timed gates. It's a jolly good idea, in my opinion. But of course, if there were timed gates and people turned up early with these big lorries, then of course they'd be sitting out on the road, wouldn't they? Or that little entrance road that there is from the roundabout. So I don't know. I mean, it was passed before, and there are a lot of conditions, but I do hope that, this council would do all it can to enforce those conditions, because it can be very, very unpleasant for residents who have to live with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skip.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I have 3 statements or questions, really, and I'd just be grateful for an answer. The first one was raised by one of the speakers about the change of class B to E, I think it was. Can you just expand on that a little later? The second thing that I note was that there will be internal working allowed in Zone 1. My question about that is, even with the windows and doors shut, if you have got a factory or machinery or noisy apparatus, it seems to me that walls aren't going to stop the noise getting through and all the rest of it, which means that actually there will be noise coming from Zone 1, apart from lorries and their beeping. Now, I seem to remember we might have had that discussion when this first came up, and I'm just questioning why we allowed internal working with potential noise on that site, and whether that could be modified or changed. And the other question was about water neutrality, and I do apologise for this, I'm a bit nerdy, but I wasn't quite sure what HRA screening assessment was, so I went down the various areas on this and found section G in the building regulations of Horsham District Council, but it's about the grey water and the water collection. Now, we don't know, and that's dependent on roof area, I understand, roof area times the annual rainfall. Now, there seem to be some problematic areas there, really. We don't know what the roof area is of this, because we're only dealing with an outline planning permission, and I haven't got a roof area, so I don't know where that comes in. You've probably got it. And secondly, I wasn't sure what the annual rainfall was, given that our climate seems to change, and we don't have a particularly at the moment rainfall which is guaranteed. So that's problematic really, and it's, I would suggest, based on assumptions that we don't know. So I'm just querying the water neutrality and how we actually do come to a situation where they are going to only use 28,000 litres, and actually the rainfall from the roof is going to be 48,000. So I'm not sure about those figures. I'm sure they're absolutely correctly calculated. I would just like to raise this one for future reference. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the officer like to respond?
Yes, we do, yeah. Okay, thank you. The first point you made was about the use classes. So the change between use class B1C, which was what was previously approved, and the now proposed use class C, G, part II. And this is down to the government's change in the use class order, which I think was in 2020. And effectively, those two use classes are exactly the same. So use class B1C was for light industrial uses, and the equivalent in the government's revised use class order schedule is use class E, G, II. So that's what the difference is there, but it isn't a difference. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same. Regarding zone 1 and internal working, so this is as before. So whilst overnight working in any of the zones is prohibited, internal working in the buildings within zone 1 was previously allowed and again has been allowed now. The environmental health officer, whilst their comments were an overall objection to the proposal on the basis of a 24-hour request for working, they have said this time and have always said that they are happy with the internal working within zone 1 only, given that it's the furthest away geographically from the main receptors. So that is consistent with the EHO's previous views on the matter, and that's why we've continued with that now. Water neutrality. So when an application is an outline, obviously a certain level of assumption has to be made. We don't know the roof area. But you're quite right, water neutrality calculation is based on roof area, indicative or predicted roof area, times by predicted rainfall in that area. So that's what the calculation in this case has been based on. We don't know the precise detail, but at reserve matters stage, that detail will have to come forward. And there is a condition, I can't remember the number of the condition, but it does require the water neutrality calculations to be in compliance once details are known at reserve matters stage.
I'm glad about that. So when we come to reserve matters, is that something that we will be considering water neutrality again properly?
Essentially, we'll need to show compliance. Now, we are aware that this methodology does work because we've granted these at Hillam Farm Business Park in Billingshurst. So it's already been approved in terms of this method of achieving water neutrality. So we know it works, but as my colleague said, we don't know the full details of the building's extent, but we do know that it can achieve water neutrality, but we will need further details at reserve matter stage in terms of its compliance with the strategy that we've already got.
The noise, the internal noise, we really haven't been able to assess properly because we don't know what's going to be there, and neither have environmental health, have they? So it could be a very large engine or a very noisy engine that is actually situated internally. Is that right? So there could be noise coming from that site affecting
it could be, and as you say, we don't know who the end occupier is going to be, and condition 17 requires for a noise management plan for each phase and each unit of development, each commercial unit to be submitted. So we would know once we know who that occupier is, and then management would be implemented accordingly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. I noted the comments submitted by, I noted the comments submitted by Warnham Parish Council and their concern about the impact of traffic along the minor lanes. Probably less likely to be lorries going along there, but certainly people going to work at the business site. And it's certainly true that there are problems with traffic using Strood Lane and Byfleet's Lane and so on. And it's very predictable that people going to and from the site would be very much tempted to use this. The measures put in previously by West Sussex County Council to deal with this rat running have not been entirely successful. There's a lot of verge damage. There are people making illegal turns in and out of Strood Lane. So I have a lot of sympathy with the Warnham Parish comments there. To add to this, it's noted at various points that this site is not an easy site to reach by sustainable transport, walking, cycling or bus. And I note that the Public Rights of Way officer in West Sussex County Council asked for a Section 106 contribution in order to improve the public right of way network to create a link from the site to join the existing rights of way towards Slinfold, and that on page 35, I've forgotten the exact paragraph number, it was considered that this wouldn't actually be effective enough to make it a condition that we could apply. Now, on the face of it, all this is irrelevant because this is just a reapplication for the same planning permission that's already been granted. But since the last planning permission was granted, there's actually been a material change in that West Sussex County Council have now been issued with a new network management guidance in April 22, requiring them to reallocate road space for walking and cycling. So what I'd like to explore is whether actually there is something that we could do in terms of improving the road conditions from the site eastwards towards Warnham and addressing the concerns about the damage and the dangerous driving and so on along the lanes. So Warnham Parish suggested there could be some traffic monitoring. I'm suggesting that the similar size of contribution could potentially be required in order to look at how we could have better enforcement of the traffic along Strood Lane, so that we didn't get an increase in rat running, and that actually that is a very popular route already for people to walk and cycle, and the inhibiting factor is the fast traffic that's using it when it's really an unsuitable route. So in actual fact, I think there is a way for West Sussex to be complying with its network management duty, and for us to improve the sustainable transport access to this site. So I'd really like the officer's comments on that, please.
With regard to the West Sussex County Council Public Rights of Way team, as before, they did request a contribution to upgrade the rights of way network within the vicinity of the site. And previously, it wasn't considered that would have a beneficial effect in terms of the commuters and the other users of the site, and how that would increase sustainable commuting to the site. So it was considered then, previously, that wouldn't be a achievable contribution, and not a contribution that that we could consider would meet the MPPF tests. And similarly, the same view has been raised by officers, so we don't consider that contribution would be achievable.
I think in terms of other concerns about highway improvements, I think obviously a guidance document could have material weight, depends if it's internal document or not. Generally speaking, when you have a previous approval on a site, you look at material changes in policy and site circumstances. That's really your key instigators to how you might consider an application differently. So if that were the case, then it may be that further improvements or further provisions can be justified. I just think it's difficult at this stage to say whether that guidance document is sufficiently material to therefore request a different change, a different outcome on this application. Thank you.
If I could come back, I think I can't see how it could possibly not be of sufficient weight in terms of the level of importance of the guidance, because this is the government guidance to all highway authorities, and it's their statutory network management guidance duty. So is there a way, I mean, I appreciate it's really difficult for you to look at this on the hoof and come to a final conclusion, and it's disappointing that West Sussex have not sort of discussed this. But it's in principle, it's clear that it would be reasonable for us to require a Section 106 contribution to help improve this. So is there a way that this could be included as a condition? Is there a way that it could be included as something that comes along as part of the reserve matters? I don't know how you do it, but it does seem that there is a way that something could be genuinely done, and it's not being sought.
Unfortunately, this wasn't brought to the attention of officers before the meeting, so we haven't had an opportunity to have recently reviewed that guidance document to be able to give a true indication at this stage as to whether that would justify the suggestion or not. Therefore, you know, we can't just impose a condition, because I can't advise whether that's reasonable or not at this stage. It could be something we could delegate approval to, subject to further consideration of that matter. But that would be for members to consider. Unfortunately, I can't give a view either way at this stage, I'm afraid.
That I'd be happy with that.
We will need an alternative motion to agree that change. It's to well, first of all, do you have a second? No, make a motion first. Yeah.
I think I'm looking to the officers to help with how to word this. So you're saying delegate with a view to approval, subject to consideration of.
My understanding is you wish the guidance document from county to be considered, and whether or not the imposition of provisions either with a condition or a Section 106 could be considered. So it would therefore be delegate the decision to the head of development for approval, subject to the consideration of further county guidance, to see whether additional provisions are included within the permission.
Mr. Chairman, can I raise a point of order on this, please? The County Council rebuilt the access from the A281 through to Warnham. So if you're coming from Guildford, you can't turn left in that road, which is what I used to do when I drove on that road for 10 years. You can only use that road coming through Warnham, which virtually nobody does. So I think we're talking something that we don't need to bother about right now, because already the County Council have taken significant and expensive action at the junction with the A281 to stop rat running going up there.
Councillor Fletcher, do you still wish to proceed despite that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll take your alternative motion at the end. I don't want to cut off the debate, so I'll.
And if I could just clarify, the guidance is the network management guidance comes from the government, and it's part of it's West Sussex County Council's statutory duty.
Just read the proposal out again. Can we just?
Yes. Well,
we just.
Okay. Councillor Minto next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. There seems to be some unknowns. Obviously, the people that will rent and what they're going to build in the site. So following on from the point about water neutrality, you mentioned that we might be able to police the noise from the people that go into there. Does that apply also for water usage in case someone going in there is very, very high intensive in terms of water, because obviously these figures are kind of subject to whatever they build and rainfall. But I would hope that we could also ensure that we're not having, I don't know, 5 super intensive operations in there that are going to take so much water, and therefore they breach the conditions. So is that something that we can build into that? And last question, it's just an interesting one about the gate. I think we all concur there is a gate there, but by approving this, does that give them the ability to remove the gate, or does it have to stay there? Thank you.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on removing the gate. They could do that tomorrow if they wanted to. That's fine. Regarding the water consumption, again, as you say, there is unknowns. We don't know who the occupiers are going to be. We have built that into the conditions. So there are 3 water neutrality related conditions within the suite of 45 conditions, one of which is to require evidence post-occupation of water consumption of each unit. So that would need to be submitted. And then obviously, as a whole site, it need to be ensured that the water consumption doesn't breach what was allowed in terms of the site being water neutral. And
that's enforceable?
Yeah, that's an enforceable condition. And each occupier would have to submit that information to us, and we would require an ongoing total of where the water is at.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Just to say, I have several speakers still, Councillor Boffey, Peter Burgess, Olsen and Greening in that order. So Councillor Boffey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very quick one, this. Sorry to labour the point, but if regarding the gate, but if members were minded to, could they actually make a condition that the gate be retained?
If that was considered to be fundamental to make the planning application acceptable, then yes, you could. I don't think it's particularly enforceable, to be honest. Bearing in mind it's not development to take the gate away, but you know, you could add a condition. I think your better option is to encourage the retention of the gate or the provision of a new gate through an informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you. I've covered the rat running, and I please, let's not go down that route because it's not in any of our papers here. But coming through to the gate, now if the gate is open, trucks that are going at any time of the day or night will go through it unless you replace it with a barrier, and 24-hour guards, which there would have to be 2 of them, are there the whole time. If you close the gate at, say, 2300 or something like that, any big trucks which are not controlled by the people who will occupy it will be parking on the A281 and will block it. Because though it's a reasonable A road, if you put a big lorry on it and there's no parking just outside, you probably get 1 truck in or not. So I'm not suggesting anything, but these gates are important, and the only thing you can do, unless the people who own the site are prepared to erect a gatehouse and make sure it's manned 24 hours a day, is it will stay open. And then into zone 1, 2 and 3, that any lorries, any vehicles which are getting there early to use that site will make noise. So I'm afraid all these noise things that we are putting in are actually unenforceable unless you operate those gates on a 24-hour period and block the A281.
Any comment from Officer Olsen on that? Okay, we're just reviewing the conditions to see what's covered.
We have got condition 12, which is for the hard and soft landscaping works, and within that, the hard landscaping works would include all boundary treatments and any security fencing. So that's part 5 of condition 12. That condition could be amended to make specific reference to details of the gate at the access point, if that's something that members would want to consider. In addition, there's condition 20, requires details of site security arrangements. And I think that's been drafted really to be on a phase by phase basis, but that could be amended to require the gate at the entrance again to be details of which to be submitted. So we can look to control it through condition 20 or condition 12.
I think we are missing the point. If the gate is closed at whatever time it is between, then the trucks which are arriving at 0500 or 0430 will park in the A281, blocking the through traffic on a very busy road that goes to and through Guildford.
When this site was occupied by Gambles, there were regularly trucks parked up to that gate. There's quite a long spur off the A281. I don't see that the A281 is ever going to be blocked by trucks. That spur could well be blocked, but to imagine that the main road is going to be blocked, I think is, well, that's cloud cuckoo land.
I'm sorry, but I was actually speaking. The only time you can interrupt me is if you are making a point of order. Now,
Sorry,
I've been going up and down that road for the last 15 years.
Let's all calm down. I appreciate your point. It's a misunderstanding.
So the point I'm actually making is if you leave the gates open, the trucks will go in and create noise. If you keep them closed, there is a real risk of a fare backup on the A281. It doesn't matter what happened earlier, this is what will happen now.
Councillor Olsen.
Thanks, Your Councillor. This is the first time I'm speaking. If I recall, I believe councillors only get one chance to speak, according to the rules, but I'm mostly speaking to second Councillor Fletcher's amendment proposal, and to ask that it come to a vote immediately after I finish speaking. I just would like to remind all the councillors that if they would read all the paperwork, they would see that West Sussex County Council had actually recommended that there be contributions from the developer towards the rights of way, so we're not asking for anything new. It was just initially believed by officers that they did not feel this is necessary. I, along with Councillor Fletcher, feel this is necessary and can be beneficial, so I would like that amendment included. I second it. Can we please vote?
I will return, but I have promised Councillor Greening, and he will be the last speaker, and then we will go to the alternative motion, and we'll see. Councillor Greening.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to ask the officers a question, if that's okay with Councillor Olsen. So my question is about the Heritage Officer. What has the Heritage Officer said on this application versus the other one? Because I noticed the Heritage Officer objected to the application in 2018, and forgive me, I was at that meeting, but I can't remember. So what did the Heritage Officer say about this application compared to the other one? And because I looked on the planning portal, but the only thing I could find were the Heritage Officer's comments were about the minerals on the site. So please could the planning officer just tell me what the Heritage Officer has said regarding this application, because at the time they were objected to it because it would, quote, erode the existing tranquil character of the wider area. So I'd just be interested in that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. It's the Heritage Officer's comments are the same really as the previous application, in that it's been identified that less than substantial harm would result from this development towards the heritage buildings that were shown on the slide earlier. As before, though, the Conservation Officer's comments refer us to paragraph 202 of the MPPF, which requires a planning balance to be made between the impact of the less than substantial harm versus the benefits that the development would bring in terms of employment and commercial floor space. So the previous application in 2018 considered that balance and considered that the benefits would outweigh that less than substantial harm, and the same conclusion has been reached here.
Thank you. Please, may I come back, Chair? Thank you. Could you just explain the term less than substantial harm versus the benefits? Could it, so is the Heritage Officer still therefore objecting, but their concerns are less than substantial? Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, the Heritage Officer hasn't specifically objected. You see in paragraph 3.5 of the report that they're response was a comment, and their job is to identify what the level of harm would be as a result of the development. They consider this level of harm to be less than substantial, and that's within a hierarchy that the NPPF has: substantial harm, less than substantial harm, or no harm. So they don't identify that there's being no harm, but they identify the harm as being less than substantial on the setting. And then the job then of the planning officer, or the decision maker, I should say, which is us, is to balance the harm versus the public benefit that the application would bring. And the officer's balanced argument there is that this application, the benefits does outweigh that harm.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Thank you. So now we will go to the
Point of order, Chairman, if I may, I would just note that Councillor Vickers did have her hand up for quite a long time, so would the Chairman be a sport and let her have one more speaker?
Very nicely put, and yes, I will. Your hand should go up a little higher.
Chairman, sorry, this has been quite a long debate. I hear everything that's been said. Quite clearly, had this been implemented, we wouldn't be going through all this discussion now. So the reason it's back is because they haven't implemented the outline application. All the details of all the concerns will come back, will it not, a reserve matter? So all those concerns about water use, lighting, all the details will be part of the reserve matters applications. I hear what Councillor Fletcher says about the new guidance on from county. So my suggestion would be that we support the delegation for approval subject to those consultations with county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will now move to the alternative motion to approve. So let's just get the wording so we're sure of it. Do we have that wording?
She wants to talk to you about it before it goes to council.
Do that formally. Yeah.
So we now have a form of words which the legal officer will read out. And so this is alternative motion to approve.
It's an alternative motion to approve the proposal. The proposal is, to delegate the decision to the head of development with a view to approval, subject to consideration of the network management duty in consultation with West Sussex, to see whether additional provision of funds can be necessary to facilitate sustainable access to the site.
If they would like to be involved, I'm obviously not going to stop them.
Okay.
In consultation with the local members, yeah.
Councillor Olsen, do you are seconding?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so all those in favour, please raise their hands. I think we've.
But somebody's raised it. And we work to a certain order. So the original motion, much to my disgust, has been put on the back burner, and we've got an unspecified motion with no backup, nothing happening, nobody knows what it involves. Please give some money to the county council. Sorry, I'm almost sure that this is an illegal amendment.
But the officers do not consider it to be illegal. We have debated this very thoroughly in the course. That's why I delayed it till the end after the debate. So we will go to the vote.
No, I'm sorry, you can't go to the vote. You've got to offer it for debate, which I think is stupid.
That's not how these standing orders work.
Legal officer says that we are allowed to debate from this point. So if anyone wishes to say anything, please raise their hand. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. I would like to state that this is an amendment with no guts in it. It's wishy-washy, something fairy, which has come out of something. There is nothing here substantial. If the proposer had said, I would like consultation with West Sussex to improve a particular road which they've already improved, then I could see some sense on it. But this is a nonsense amendment which means nothing but gives the county council free rein to ask for all the 206 money.
Does anyone else wish to speak? You are allowed to speak again because it's an alternative motion. Councillor Olsen.
I will speak. I'm a bit surprised, again, if Councillor Burgess would read the full report, page 21, paragraph 6.58, that I think effectively what Councillor Fletcher is asking is why we are not asking the proposed development to contribute the recommended sum that West Sussex County Council Public Rights of Way officers suggested for further improvements. So if that council perhaps doesn't value improvements based on development or infrastructure, he can have that opinion. But I feel happy to second this, and I do not find it wishy-washy. I think it's quite explicit what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands, so I think we will now move to the vote. So, do we need to read it out again? No. Okay, so please raise your hands if you're in support, all those in favour of the motion, the alternative motion. All those against? And any abstentions? No.
Just to confirm, we had 14 vote for, 6 against and no abstentions. Therefore, the alternative motion has been granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move to item 7. Yes. If someone can find Councillor Ritchie, that would be great. Yep.
Chair, Chair, sorry, please may I have a 5-minute recess? Just because it looks like on for 90
Everybody's already
minutes.
at 5-minute recess, comfort break.
Thank you.
I was right, didn't I?
I know, there seems to be some random things every time.
That's what this is, isn't it? It's out of left field sometimes, don't you? Something to think on your feet. Yes.
There is a problem in the this is something that's been raised about whereby the amendment is raised. Not as much of
Yeah. I was just, all I was anxious to make sure was that we have a debate on. Once it's seconded, then we have to have a debate.
So what I'm trying to do is to stop that happening. When somebody wants to think of so that people get the chance to speak. It's been very frustrating. That's what I do. So I consider that. What I do not want to do is
Oh, good. I think we're best. You're keeping them on track, and I'm keeping you on track.
People insist on that sort of thing.
Yeah. Is there a point at which you need to stand up and tell them what the rules are? Well, I think we've seen the rules, actually.
There is a problem with the rules of debate, which is this issue, this ongoing issue. The minute we get to you cut off the debate.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to stop that by holding back.
No, we were quite right. And then when we did moved on without the debate, that's when I sort of stepped in and stopped them.
Ladies and gentlemen, here are we.
We're the toilet.
Anyone really wants to say?
I just feel that he was pushing for you to say something. Yes, and it's sort of wrong on relying on the chair. I just think he was pushing for as a planning solicitor to say something than you as the chair.
Oh no. This is a triangle I think works,
I think we've been within the rules. I don't think we've done anything that isn't within the rules.
Fair enough, she knows it, that was a complete left field thing.
Probably should have raised it before.
No, she should have done that.
But has it changed since?
Well, it's changed since 2017.
No, I'm thinking the comments that were made from the council, because on their road assessment, traffic assessment, it doesn't mention anything about
I don't know that. I don't know when those comments were made. But it was, the county to even take account of the guidance. They do desktop surveys. Probably printed it off again.
Which is always fun. It's a bit busy, desktop survey. Yeah. But obviously the chair runs the meeting and I'm just there to advise. So that's and there's a fine line, and that's why I don't
We're very busy. We need to rewrite the language. Stop that.
That's on.
Okay, if I can call your meeting to order again, let's try and get this going as fast as we can. So item 7 is DC 22-2037, Honeywood House, Horsham Road, Roehook, Horsham. And if I can call upon the officer to present the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, prior to the presentation, just to pick up on a few typos in the report, paragraph 3.22 refers to Russell Parish Council, whereas it should be Rudgerwick Parish Council. And paragraph 6.20 refers to a draft neighbourhood plan, whereas the plan has actually been made. The application relates to land at Honeywood House, which is located on the eastern side of Horsham Road. Honeywood House comprises a nursing home providing care for around 25 residents, with the site setting substantial grounds with a forecourt for parking and servicing. The site is in a countryside location comprising fields and woodland with scattered buildings related to farms, rural enterprises and isolated dwellings. This application relates specifically to a series of outbuildings within the grounds, with their location shown by the red line on the aerial photo. So these are the outbuildings in question, with the clock tower and stable building to the right-hand side, and what's referred to as a cottage and tractor shed to the left. The application proposes partial demolition of the clock tower building and conversion of the remainder to a 5-bed dwelling. The left-hand building would be demolished in its entirety and replaced with a new 5-bed dwelling. So these are proposed elevations. The retained building is on the right-hand side and the new build dwelling on the left-hand side. So these are the front elevations fronting the drive, and the rear elevations, the retained building on the left. This is the proposed layout and footprint of the dwellings. The blue dotted line shows the extent of what's existing on the site and what will be demolished. The blue building on the right is again the converted dwelling, and the pink purple on the left, the new build. The properties would benefit from their own parking area to the front and rear gardens. And it should be noted that the rear gardens would require the diversion of a public right-of-way, which currently runs alongside the top elevation. There is an extensive planning history on the site for dwellings, between 2 and 4 in total, and this is set out in paragraph 2.6 of the report. These have all been refused planning permission, with one application also dismissed as appeal. A key issue in these decisions was the countryside location of the site, together with the poor access to nearby settlements and services. These issues are still relevant to a current application, which remains in an unsustainable location on a site which has not been allocated for housing. As with previous applications, the proposal is being justified as a means of providing income to support the nursing home use of the site. And in support of this, a management plan has been provided setting out short to medium term requirements for the care home, including maintenance related expenditure. There is, however, no appraisal in the application to establish the level of income that will be generated by the proposed development and how this would be proportionate and appropriate to the ongoing needs of the nursing home. The absence of a clear link between the scale of a development and what it would deliver to the care home were raised as concerns in previous applications on the site, and no further application has been provided as part of this current application. The potential benefits which would be derived from this current application are not therefore considered to outweigh the identified conflicts with the HDPF, and the application is therefore recommended for refusal as set out in the committee report.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers. Can I call, first of all, Simon Harvey? You have 2 minutes. Thank you. Can you press the right-hand button? Thank you.
Predating the current house, these simple outbuildings have had additions by Henry Shaw and Ernest George. Over time, other buildings have been added or adapted within the courtyard format, some rather incongruous in their application. Many of these elements are now beyond feasible repair. The design has been carefully considered with regard to the surrounding context. The main factor that has driven our design is our desire to preserve the original clock tower stables. The design for the new build unit is set upon an L shape, reflecting the existing form of the replaced buildings. The roof and eaves line have been purposefully set lower so as not to compete with the adjacent clock tower, and at the front, simple coach house style design features are presented, comprising of larger glazed openings set within barn doors at ground floor, reminiscent of the current garage openings on site, with minimised hayloft type openings at first floor. A continuation of courtyard gates and hedgerow further reduce the effect of the building in context of the main approach to Honeywood House. With the clock tower, the proposal is to remove all clutter, confusing subdivisions, and replace the current rambling single story with a simple contemporary entrance extension, now cohering the old with the new and all set behind the main walls and gates to be restored. Amendments have been made during this application to ensure that no part of the development lies within the ancient woodland to the rear. No trees require removal, and an arboricultural consultant has reviewed and confirmed there will be no adverse impacts on trees. To conclude, we're pleased that the officers consider the development to relate sympathetically to the surroundings and appropriate within the setting of Honeywood House, which is a non-designated heritage asset. Should a positive outcome result this evening, the current appeal underway on the previous applications may be withdrawn. In our opinion, without immediate investment, the clock tower will be lost to further deterioration and decay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second speaker, Paul Johnson, and you have 2 minutes also. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Paul Johnson, and I've been a trustee at Honeywood House for a little over 10 years. The reason I'm here today is to appeal the recent decisions against our proposal to undertake restoration and improvement programmes of 3 derelict properties that fall under our governance. These same properties, empty and derelict properties, incidentally, cost Honeywood House over £8,000 annually in business tax. We've operated as a nursing home for local people since 1955, holding full charity commission status. As such, each and every pound that is made is required legally to be reinvested back into the care home. We are quite simply not permitted to take any funds away from the main purpose of the business. Honeywood House was built in the 1780s and as such was never intended to be used as a home for those in need, particularly with the complex medical and legal requirements that quite rightly place on us today. The upkeep is a constant battle for our maintenance team, never mind the improvements that we seek to make to the standard of comfort for both residents, staff and visiting relatives. The COVID-19 pandemic was something that none of us could have envisaged, and the devastating effect that it had on Honeywood House is clear to see to this day. We sadly lost 6 residents during this period, and due to it being a notifiable disease, we were not allowed to occupy rooms that then stood empty for several months. This resulted in a reduction of income of nearly 40% during the period. The wonderful staff that weren't placed on furlough all agreed to a person to reduce the overtime rate that they would receive for the extended tours of duty that they were then required to work to cover for absent staff. The subsequent insurance claim for business disruption was refused due to a clause inserted by the United Kingdom government affecting all care homes, resulting in the original claim of over £47,000 being refused. It was during this time that I wrote to all residents, staff and relatives that there was a high likelihood that we would cease to be financially viable and would be forced to permanently close our doors. Thankfully, several families made generous donations, and the deferment of our UK government tax liability for a few months helped enormously. To sum up, Honeywood House is a family home, and all of our staff and residents are quite simply our family. All of our staff and residents are from the local area. We care passionately about the standard of care we deliver.
If you could draw to a close now, you're past your 2 minutes.
Can I just finish the sentence? We care passionately about the standards of care that we deliver, but regretfully, should we be unsuccessful in this application, which will provide vital funds, the very future of Honeywood House as a local nursing home will be in doubt, and some impossible decisions may need to be made. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can I now call Isabella Buono? And you also have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. As Mr. Harvey and Mr. Johnson have already explained, this is a well-designed and sorely needed development. Unlike the business park proposal, this application's in front of you because it's generated local support. Nonetheless, the officer's recommendation is to refuse. That recommendation is beset by a number of missteps, but in the time available, I'll speak to only 3. The first is that officers have approached this application without proper consideration of the starting point, which is that the cottage has had planning permission for staff accommodation since 1963. Staff have been able to access shops and medical and leisure facilities without issue, and that already consented situation is the baseline against which the newly proposed replacement dwellings fall to be assessed. The second issue is that officers haven't addressed you as to the proper statutory framework, and that's that you're required to consider whether the proposal accords with the development plan as a whole, not whether it accords with each and every development plan policy, but whether it accords with the plan as a whole. The fact that this site is outside the settlement boundary is simply not enough. The third point is that even if this proposal fails to accord with the development plan, you should still grant planning permission because material considerations support that conclusion. The most important of them is the tilted balance at paragraph 11(9)(d) of the framework, and that's that planning permission must be granted unless the benefits are significantly and demonstrably outweighed by any harm. The officer has not referred you to any harm of anything like that magnitude, and nor could he or she who wrote the report. And that's because it's accepted that this proposal wouldn't cause any harm to the historic environment. Quite the contrary, it would preserve and enhance it. It wouldn't intrude into the green field. It would reuse a brownfield site, help alleviate the shortfall in this district, and would also, as you've heard just now, support a rural business. There is no harm caused by this proposal, still less harm of the scale that's required by national policy. And so we ask that permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would officers like to come back on any of those points?
Yes, thank you, yeah. So the issue of the council's current 5-year housing land supply is addressed in paragraph 6.46 and 6.47 of the committee report. In these reports, these paragraphs essentially quote recent appeal decisions which have found that the benefit derived from up to 7 units of housing in the countryside provides a fairly limited benefit, which is inadequate to it, which provides insufficient contribution to a shortfall of housing as to outweigh the conflict with spatial strategy set out in the HDPF. And that position and those paragraphs are entirely comparable to the situation which would arise from this current application. The application would create a net increase in housing in the countryside, is even if we accept that this unit here and the gable fronting the photo is the cottage, even if we accept that that is an existing residential unit, we're still creating an extra unit on the site. And it should also be noted that the planning statement of the application has essentially confirmed that that building is not suitable for conversion in its current form, which is why the report brings into question whether it can be used as a house in its current condition. In terms of the reasons for supporting the application and the potential benefit it would provide for the care home, I think it's perfectly understandable how you'd reach that conclusion. As officers, we've taken into account the previous appeal decision where a planning inspector specifically dismissed an appeal for housing on the site because of the remote location of the site in terms of settlements and services, which made it unsuitable for residential development and contrary to the HDPF. Now, to overcome that conflict, we'd need to be able to demonstrate that the benefits of providing housing on the site are of such magnitude as to render that conflict acceptable, essentially. But in the absence of any detailed information setting out what level of income this development could achieve and how that would help the funding of a nursing home, we can't reach that conclusion. Now, that lack of information has been existed since the first application in 2016. It's not a new issue, and it's not something we're able to address at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll go to the local member, which is Councillor Langley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to start that I have visited the site, seen the application site, and also had a tour of the nursing home, and I understand full well what their problems are. I fully understand that this proposal would be outside policy 26 of the HDPF, also outside policies 1, 2, 3, 4 of the HDPF. But what we seem to have here is a conflict of planning policies versus the need for social care. The care at the moment is going through dire things, as everybody knows, and the government has still been trying to find a way out of providing good social care for everybody that needs it. It would be a tragedy if we did see this nursing home disappear. I know that the inspectors refused a previous application, DC 162637, and stated that although these houses would be not isolated in the sense that they'd be near a large nursing home, they would still be remote from day-to-day services. And the provision of market houses location not linked to a rural use. However, I know we can't make policy on the hoof, but if we could, there should be an exception for this particular application so that we don't lose a much needed nursing home in our district. So I would propose that we actually reject the officer's recommendation and seek approval for the application.
If you want to make an alternative motion to refuse, I'll come to that at the end of the debate, but first of all, officers would like to reply.
Can I just clarify that officers of the view we do not have sufficient information to demonstrate that this development would secure the longer term future of the care home? And in fact, you can see this was discussed at a previous appeal decision, which the relevant paragraphs are on the screen before you. And at paragraph 14, the inspector said, "I'm not convinced that it would necessarily ensure the long-term future of the home or completion of priority maintenance." So I think we have to bear in mind, whilst this may well provide a financial injection into the care home, we do not have details of what that injection will be, nor have we information to be confident it would ensure the longer term viability of the care home, other than perhaps in completing some essential maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. If I'll come back to you at the end, and if you wish to move the motion, we can consider it then. I have Councillor Bradnam next, please.
Chairman, I'm not really quite clear. They said it's a charity, this nursing home. I don't think all nursing homes have charitable status, do they, by any means? I have actually been to the home several times to visit an elderly person some years ago, and it is lovely. It really is lovely. But I'm not really sure what these properties are for. Are they for anybody to come along and buy to inject cash into the business, or are they for staff, or is it accommodation, additional accommodation? I'm not quite sure what they're actually for. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have a financial appraisal of a development to show what the income's coming from, whether it's from rent of the properties or whether it's from their sale. So it's essentially, if it's approved, it'd be for market housing. So it would be for anyone to occupy it or buy.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I hate to disagree with my colleague sitting to my right, but I think the policy reasons for refusal are very clear, and I couldn't support the application to approve this on the basis that this is clearly outside the built-up area. It is remote, it's not the most sustainable location, and whilst I wouldn't like to see the loss of the nursing home, there is no guarantee that it will protect it in perpetuity. So for those reasons, I will be supporting the recommendation as printed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Greening.
Thank you. A question for the officers, please. It's very clear on the recommendations. It's an unsustainable location. If, as a committee, we were to, as my colleague has suggested, go against your recommendation and the recommendation of the planning inspector at appeal, would that open us up? So if we did this now, would an inspector look at us and go, well, why has Horsham done that now? Could that set a precedent for us in the future? Could it set a dangerous precedent for us in the future if we were to approve something now that is quite clearly against the Horsham District Planning Framework and the MPPF? Thank you.
Obviously all sites different, but I think allowing housing in the countryside where obviously offers consider it's not justified and we don't have sufficient evidence to demonstrate there are particular circumstances, I think it would be something perhaps other sites would draw on if they were seeking to bring forward development in the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask a question? Do the people that actually own and operate the care home actually own the land on which these properties would be built?
I understand it's within the same ownership, the same estate. Yes, yeah.
Well, in that case, surely that it is blatantly obvious that any profit that they make from the development would be channeled towards ensuring the continuity and financial well-being of the care home.
I think that's part of the issue, that we don't know what return development would create. We don't know the costs of converting the building, the costs of building a new dwelling. If you don't know the costs and potential income, you don't know what benefit that will provide the care home and whether it's of such substance as to justify development, which has already been found to be contrary to HDPF. So we can't quantify the benefits it might deliver.
Well, surely there's no question that it would be beneficial to the people that own the land, and I don't see that there's any lack of correlation between selling the land potentially to developers, which they would then channel towards the care home. I'm sorry, I'm afraid that I am missing the point there.
I think the difficulty is whilst there may be some contribution, does that retain the care home? You know, does it provide any longer term benefits? We know how it is. The materials expensive they are, you know, how much income does it actually generate? What difference would it actually make to the longer term operation of the care home? That is an unknown, and therefore if it's an unknown, it's not, in our view, evidence to support the development. How can it justify it when you simply don't know what benefit it would have to the financial viability of the care home? Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question.
I'll come to you because you've already spoken. So can I go to Councillor Peter Burgess, please?
I think what's out of this is we don't know who owns it. If this house was being built, and originally it was two houses, and now it's one house, who owns it? Now, the gentleman who spoke second, I think, said it was a trusteeship, so we need to know about the trust. Whether the money, as somebody has said, allowing for the building costs, the land costs, etc., how much money will go into the trust, and will all that money go into the care home? How many patients are in this care home? 5, 10, 20, 30? We need to know that, because this is something that's going to affect us. If this care home is closed, something will happen. It'll be sold off, it'll be made into housing, whatever it happens. So these are the relevant facts that we need to judge as councillors, because our ability is to adjust what Ofsters say to things that they, under the planning rules, can't actually consider. We need to know if the precedent of actually allowing one house against the fact that Ofsters feel it ought to be turned down, and I can understand this. So the sum of what I'm saying is, can we defer this, please, and bring it back when we've got all the information that we need, because it's going to be an emotional decision as to whether we go purely by the planning rules, and I can understand where Emma and her team are coming from, or if we exercise our right to be compassionate councillors, and we can't decide on the information we've got now. So I don't know whether anybody will support me, but I will propose that this is deferred pending all the information that I put forward, and maybe other members of council would like to ask as well. Thanks.
I'd second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take this is a vote now as a motion to defer, because we would have time to debate any other issues, and all other councillors could speak if it's carried. So, Councillor Bradham, you're seconding? Yep. Yeah. Okay. So this is a motion to defer with regard to Councillor Richards. Is point of order, or? Yes, because it's a motion to defer. If successful, it would come back to committee anyway. So
what I wanted to say is relevant to what Councillor Burgess has said.
Yes, you can speak on.
Yes,
you can. Yes, you can. Yeah.
Chairman, if I may, obviously if we defer an item for a particular reason, it's generally the position that you would debate the other matters, and the reason for deferral would generally be the basis for sole debate at any subsequent meeting. It is open to members to discuss other matters, but we need to be mindful if we're requesting that the applicant provide additional information, that members should consider all of the facts of the application and not just whether additional information is required. Does that make sense?
Councillor Ritchie, I'll allow you to speak. Yeah.
Thank you. It seems to me there's 2 points that are to be properly considered at this meeting. The first one is, has the applicant submitted what I would call a proper business case to justify why the harm is overcome by the good towards the charity? We're told that the inspector took that point into account in 2016 and said that the business case had not been proposed, and that was a matter that the inspector took into consideration in refusal. And we now have a fresh application in front of us, and officers are saying to us that they again have still not received a proper business case. That business case might say that the sale of the land, if it was to be sold on the open market, would generate a capital sum, and that capital sum could then be invested to demonstrate that the charity was sustainable for the foreseeable future. Similarly, the building out of this dwelling and then rental in the open market might produce a rental income that similarly would demonstrate that the charity taking its normal income and normal outgoings would become sustainable with that extra source of income. I have a difficulty with being drawn into described as the emotions of this case, when in fact actually what officers are saying to us and the inspector has said to us is there should be a business case that's been put before us. And from what I can tell, it is not. And that, I think, fatally flaws the application. So much as I think members of this committee would like to support this charity in its endeavours, the charity has got to do the work to put us in the position to make that decision, hopefully with the support of officers. There is a second point, though, which needs to be drawn attention to, and that is the report of our conservation officer, who is sympathetic, clearly sympathetic to the applicant, but says the design of this dwelling is something that you might normally find in a suburban setting, not in a rural setting. Goes on to say that you'd hope that the design would be of a converted barn, but it is not. And I find that just a matter of regret that that point hasn't been taken into account. So when the applicant's representative speaks of officers not having weighed up everything in the round, I think they have weighed up everything in the round. They have seen the design, and the design doesn't fit the locality. And the representative should really have pointed out that the business case, as highlighted by the inspector back in 2016, and no doubt by officers in relation to this application, should have been addressed. So for those reasons, I'm with the officers on this occasion, but I have to say with regret, and I suspect many members of this committee will also express regret that they've been put into this position. Now, if I've misunderstood it, please, I'd invite the head of development to speak against me, but if I'm on solid grounds, then I'd appreciate some support.
Any comments from officers?
There's nothing I disagree with Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak on the motion to defer? Councillor Walters.
Thank you. I totally agree with my previous colleague, or my colleague who's not previous, previously spoke. We do actually have a precedent that we made many, many years ago with Shipley Windmill, and we asked for a financial statement, and it was basically, how is it going to be funded? How much is it going to cost? Benefits to the public, and in this case it's a charitable status, so it's like how would that benefit the charity and the residents, and what would their plans be for the future based on the build and all that sort of thing. So I think there is a precedent that we have in our pocket that we can use, and I think on that basis, if it is deferred, then it has to be subject to a financial statement based similar to what we've asked for in the past. So that is clear for the applicant to do, and as you've rightly pointed out, they've failed to do that several times in the past. And I would also bring people's attention to the conservation officer, who's actually said that he would be happy with a scaled down version of this, and it's like all I'm hearing is it's this or nothing. And again, because of the previous applications, it seems to be a brick wall for the applicant, and I'm quite saddened by that, really. So I would support the deferment, but I would like it to be clear that what we need is a financial statement about costs, about build, about the benefits to the charity and to the residents, and where that sits in the future. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fletcher.
As Councillor Walters points out, there are various places in this report where it's pointed out that development on the site actually could be possible. It's just that this proposed development is not the right one for that site. As Councillor Ritchie has pointed out, there has been no financial case forthcoming. And I don't see that if we were to ask to defer, there's any reason to expect that a valid financial case would come forward within a reasonable period. And as Councillor Vickers has pointed out, there are very sound reasons why the officers are recommending that this particular application is refused. I think it's inappropriate to defer in the light of all those considerations. I think there's a very strong case for refusing the application as the officers suggest. But that still leaves it open to the applicant to come back with a more appropriate design and with a business case to back it, because this is one of those cases where finances actually does matter in planning. In most cases they don't. This is an issue where it is a relevant factor, but it's really the onus is on the applicant to go away and come up with that information. And I think we should therefore be refusing rather than deferring.
Thank you very much. Councillor Skip.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just a query, really. I'm looking down the page. I see we've got to application refused on the 18th of August, appeal pending. Did I understand it correctly that the one of the speakers suggested that should we pass this, the appeal would be withdrawn?
It was mentioned, yes, yeah.
It was mentioned. It seems to me that the case the officers have put forward is a very strong case. I think there are a lot of holes in what we've heard, and I'm not entirely convinced that that it's the right decision to defer this. I think that we should personally, and I would agree with Councillor Vickers and Councillor Fletcher, that we should reject this, and that if there is another application, then we'll consider it. But there is still an appeal pending, and that interests me because I think that it's not going to change very much from the previous inspectors.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the, we'll vote on the motion to defer. Councillor Burgess, if you could clarify the grounds.
I'm just trying to think of the correct way to do this, and Emma's looking very glum right now. She's smiling now, that's better. Why did I put this forward and support is because I think there is a solution somewhere. Now, it can be what Councillor Skipp and Fletcher suggested, that we turn it down, but infer to the applicants that if they get the right building sent through, we would probably, you can't say this, but we would look at it favourably. The point is, why I'm trying to do this is we have got a care home which may well be in trouble. We know nothing about, Councillor Ritchie raised the point about there's no business plan here, so the first thing is we need to see a business plan. So I'm not really worried, providing that we take this further to a possible solution.
I'm not clear, do you wish to remove your deferral? Have you withdrawn the motion?
Okay, I second that I agree that we would like to maintain the deferment.
So you are moving the motion to defer? Yes. Yeah. And the grounds are?
Waiting until we want to see a proper business plan and a lot more details, which frankly we should already have at this stage. I understand why officers ignore the rest of it.
Thank you. And we have a second Tony Brown. Councillor Skipp, unless this is a point of order.
I'd just like to come back on some words that were used by Councillor Burgess. I wouldn't like him to give the impression that I suggested that if they came back with another plan, one would look at it favourably. So I would like that noted, that it wasn't what I said and any intention.
Okay.
I need to.
So we are voting the motion to, alternative motion to defer, subject to submission of a full business plan to support the development. So we are voting, if you agree with that, raise your hands. So all those in favour, raise your hands. All those against? And any abstentions?
So we had 8 votes for, 10 against, and 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, so that motion failed. So we will now go back to the substantive motion. And again, I think we can move straight to the vote on this. So this is the original motion to refuse.
Point of order, Chairman.
Councillor Richard, do you have a point of order?
Yes, Councillor Lander proposed approval. And so the question really is whether he has a seconder.
Very true, I forgot that. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Lander, you're still interested in moving that alternative motion?
No, I will, in view of the debate we've just heard, I will withdraw that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we will move to the original motion to refuse. All those in favour, please raise their hands. All those against? Any abstentions?
So we had 12 voting for, 2 against, 6 abstentions. So therefore, the motion has been refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to the last substantive item on the agenda, which is DC 22-1474, Roffey Football Club, Bartholomew Way, Horsham. Would the officer like to make a presentation?
Sorry, Chair, point of order quickly.
Yes.
I should have raised it at the start as for the solicitor. It's a personal interest, it's not prejudicial or anything. I have played football in the past at Roffey Football Club. I know some people who play there, but it in no way impairs my judgment having played football in Horsham for 25 years. Okay.
Okay. That's enough anecdotes of your personal footballing history.
Okay, this application relates to public open space within the northern edge of Horsham's built-up area boundary. For reference, the A264 is to the north, the railway line to the south, and the site is accessed from Bartholomew Way. The open space is primarily laid out as 2 football pitches surrounded by extensive landscaping. The application relates specifically to the right-hand pitch, shown by the red line, which provides the home ground for Roffey Football Club. So this is the layout of the eastern part of the site, with the clubhouse and parking to the top left corner and the pitch in the middle. The blue box shows an existing covered seated stand, with this application seeking consent for a new covered area for standing spectators, shown by the red rectangle. So these are some photos of the existing pitch, looking across to the existing covered stand with the arrow showing the location of the proposed new stand. The design and scale of the stand is comparable to the existing seated stand and would primarily be seen against the backdrop of surrounding vegetation. The stand would provide improved facilities which would support an existing use of the site. The stand would not result in an increased level of activity on the site, and its siting would not result in unacceptable harm to neighbouring amenity. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We don't have any speakers on this, so I'll go straight to the local member, Councillor Karen Burgess.
Hello, I believe my other ward member has given you some notes. I would like to hear those first before I comment, please.
Okay, who has those? I do not.
Oh, okay. I saw Councillor Baldwin today at Victoria Station, and he said he'd pass some notes to you to read. That's what he told me at the ticket gates this morning at 8 o'clock. but
do you want to speak whilst I look for those, or? No.
Chairman, I used to live very close to that site. I'll just briefly comment that the site is very.
Clearly, he didn't send them to you in time, Councillor Milne, so I will speak.
I can't see them.
I'm in favour of this because I feel that Roffey Football Club have pulled themselves up. They've got promoted. They're doing very well, and the more people they can attract to their stadium, the better. They have actually introduced a clubhouse, a small one, where they're selling soft drinks and coffee and things, and they have got other plans for the future with regard to this site.
So I think we ought to give them encouragement. If we've got sort of over 100 people turning up paying £10 each, that's boosting the local economy. And I feel that if they have another stand, more people will go because they don't have to stand there in the rain. And it's only a good thing for the local area. And it involves the local people too, and the children. And that's, I give it the thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Burgess.
Just 3.8, can you note please that North Horsham Parish Council, which also I am a member of, supported this application, but to make sure we've got sufficient litter bins. Now we can't, that can go in as a condition.
Yeah, we could add it as note to applicants.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Olsen.
Yes, just two questions, or a couple of questions based on reading the responses from local residents nearby. One had mentioned trees, and I just wanted to be clear with the officers that, because I didn't see any sort of overculture, I can say that word, report whether this building of the stand has any impact on the green infrastructure or the trees. And then my second question was actually in response to something that the local member said, in that with another stand, more people will go. Well, I think that is the main concern of the local residents, because unfortunately this facility is down the end of a residential street, and another resident provided documentation of what happens on match day with vehicles parked well outside of the parking. So I don't see that a condition of this report is to provide additional parking if more people are expected to go because there's a stand. So those are my 2 points.
Can I just make a point here, Chairman, that this area is particularly badly affected by the ash dieback. So the trees that you're concerned about, a large proportion of them are actually going to be chopped.
Councillor Burgess, if you can make that at the end, I will come back to you.
Yes, in terms of the stand itself, there aren't any restrictions on capacity at the ground, and the application isn't a change of use, so we couldn't specify that this stand will, as a matter of fact, increase attendance at the ground. It may well encourage it during inclement weather, but we've just taken it as improved facilities rather than additional facilities for spectators. In terms of the surrounding vegetation, there may well need to be some cutback, but the application form said none would have to actually be removed to facilitate the stand. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. The report makes it clear that this isn't going to increase the capacity of the grounds, but as Councillor Burgess says, obviously there is an underlying intention that it will increase the total attendance over the year by encouraging more people to come when the weather's inclement or people who wouldn't have come anyway. And I do note a lot of objections from residents because of the parking issues associated with match days. So notwithstanding what the officer has just said, I was wondering whether it might be possible to have an informative or a condition that we would seek the club to have some parking stewards on match days, because the parking, the photographic evidence obviously shows that there is a parking problem there, and it does seem that it should be amenable to control with some parking stewards.
Would the officer like to respond?
If members are inclined, you could have a note to applicant in that respect. It's certainly not something you can condition, and even a note to applicant, I'm not sure there can be an expectation over that when essentially, as my colleague has set out, there is no clear and compelling evidence that this would result in an increase in capacity. And if there are existing issues, that's not a direct result of this development we have before us. It's open to members to add one, but I personally don't think that's reasonable. Thank you.
Councillor Skip.
Just to say, I fully support this. I think this is a great step forward for a club that's done well to over the last few years, and I would like to fully support it.
Thank you. Councillor Minto.
Yeah, I just want to say I fully support this and will support anything to do with health and sport in the district. Obviously not predetermined on that, but also as someone that goes to various matches, it might be worth just sharing about crowds that do go to games at that level. It's not massive, to be perfectly honest. Broadheath, who are near the top of the table, have got stands, and most people don't stand in them, they just stand around the perimeter, especially on nice days, and the stands aren't tremendously utilised. I would probably suggest this is more for inclement weather, for a bit of shelter, and I don't personally see that this is going to raise the gate massively. Obviously conscious that cars, etc., but on a rainy day, most people are going to use cars to get there. So, but I fully support this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Greening.
Thank you. Just to echo my colleague, Councillor Minto, I've just looked at the last attendance that Roffey Football Club had. It was 55 people. And we should be absolutely supporting a football club that was founded during the reign of Queen Victoria. So long may they continue their success.
I'll second that. Councillor Hogman, did you want to speak?
I was just going to say that there is heavily tree screening around this particular site. The stands won't be visible from the road. I don't see them doing any harm, and happy to support the application.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. I'll go back to the local member, Councillor Karen Burgess.
Just to make a point, they do have stewards parking, just to ensure that the local residents are not given too much hassle. Obviously, there is some parking on the streets, that's inevitable, but there is a fairly substantial car park by the clubhouse where most people can park. So it isn't something they're unaware of. They are aware that they need to do something about their parking, but most people stay local and walk there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now go to the vote. So the motion is to approve as conditioned. All those in favour, please raise their hands.
Can I just double check that Councillor Newton has left?
She has, yes.
She's
She
left,
has.
right, thank you.
I think that was unanimous. Any against? And any abstentions?
Okay, so 19 were in favour for this application, so therefore it's been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final item, item 9, urgent business. We haven't any, so we're finished. Thank you very much.
Could everyone take their glasses and cups and everything back to the table, please, to save the officers doing it?